You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to Scuderia F1, the podcast that's always up to speed with the latest Formula One news. Follow us on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Dailey and Kevin Laramée.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Scuderia F1, the podcast that is always up to speed with Formula One. But Mark, lately we've been talking about other racing as well. Indy 500 coming up at the end of the month, of course, with Fernando Alonso's participation in the May Classic. But you know what? Today and yesterday, I've been on a binge watching of some sort of 24 hours of Le Mans documentary, from the old time to today, to Peugeot, to Porsche, to Audi, to Toyota. I've been watching it, and Mark, it all stems from me playing a lot of Project Cars lately. And if there's Project Cars on the PlayStation 4, by the way, drivers and fans out there, add me on PlayStation Network. And why not? If you have a spare steering wheel, I'm tired of using my remote. Send it my way too, because I could use a decent steering wheel and some pedals. So if you have a spare set laying around, send it my way.
Well, you know, there is hope for you, Kevin, because there is a competition going out there right now, and McLaren has this, they're offering the winner of this competition a 1-year contract to be their simulator driver, and they'll work with the team and the engineers and go around to different tracks around the world. So if you're into esports, you know, maybe one of our listeners, perhaps maybe even one of our hosts, not me, because I don't do enough gaming to actually be good enough, but it's amazing nowadays what esports is and what it's becoming. My friend and co-host from my other podcast, From the Backline, Jorge, he works for EA Sports. He's in the competitive gaming division for FIFA. So for anybody that loves the FIFA franchise and loves soccer, then yeah, Jorge's got the best job in the world, and he's off to the finals in Berlin there next week. And it's amazing. I think he said that the winner will take home something like $160,000 in prize money. It's big. It's really big, and
it's live on TV. I DVR'd it. It's amazing. I watch people play. I'm like, oh my god. But you know what I'm discovering, though, relating to this podcast, the community of Project Cars, it's quite insane. And there's setup out there, people with steering wheels, and it looks so amazing. And I really, I have jealousy, I have envy right now of just a steering wheel. And my budget does not necessarily permit me from, I don't want to necessarily buy a cheap one. What's the point of buying it? Right? You're just not going to have the actual force feedback and the good feelings, right? Yeah. So I'm saving up for maybe a few months down the road to equip myself with a normal one. But if you actually have a spare one, I'm not going to say no either way. It's insane, the community, and I'm learning more about the actual adjustment of cars, and you're actually learning more about racing and cars themselves by playing those type of simulation, because it's more than games, Mark, at this point. Project Cars is it's a simulation, and I've been actually doing a 24-hour Le Mans. I've been doing pretty good.
It's pretty cool, and it just the way that computers and software and games and things like that have just evolved over the years. That, I mean, it is a completely immersive thing. And like you were just saying about the steering wheel and the pedals and everything, there's two kinds. There's the kind that you can afford, and then there's the kind that you really want, and that would really give you the
cockpit.
Yeah.
I would actually want an actual cockpit and almost like a bubble 360 degrees around it with the actual screen on it. And yeah, if I was a millionaire, I would probably have have an actual, I don't know, Williams from 1997 in my living room, probably.
Well, you're taking it to a whole new extreme. I was just going to say, the really good steering wheel and pedal setup. But yeah, if money was no object, then I'd probably have a nice collection as well.
Exactly. Why not? Then just add this, and why not a paint job on the fiberglass monocoque? Oh, here we go. We got ourselves a nice simulator here.
But it's interesting what you're saying, though. Just the whole Fernando to Indy Indy thing, how it's really sort of kicked off a lot of interest in, or maybe not kicked off, I would say it's probably reignited or rekindled my interest, especially, I know yours as well, in Indy cars. And then just the whole Triple Crown thing, Indy, Monaco, and then Le Mans. And you just sort of go around and you sort of come full circle and just you come back to Indy, and then you kind of revisit all these old races. Like you were saying, you've been watching all these old races on YouTube and places like that. And it's really sort of, I don't remember a similar event that's really sort of gotten me this interested in recent times, at any rate.
No, and I've been thinking, and you know what's the big, like, what's getting people's attention, what's like the curiosity factor is the crossover aspect, right? It's the eternal battle of American League playing the National League when they never play each other. What happens when the one-off? And the one-off is amazing. The Super Bowl, it's the AFC versus the NFC. They don't play each other, and the one-game Super Bowl, it's big. It's kind of like that aspect. You have a driver that we've been seeing in F1 for more than a decade, trying to test himself, prove himself somewhere else. And if you remember when Jacques Villeneuve went to NASCAR, that Daytona 500 was huge, at least in Canada, and the same for other European drivers. And when you have Nico Hülkenberg a few years ago going to Le Mans and winning it as the third car for Porsche, winning it, the first win for Porsche in their 17th win, but it was years in the making. Those crossover aspect, the drivers that actually get, like, the fans can tell they're driving because they're driver, not just because they're, no offense to maybe Lance Stroll either, but not just a rich kid who's getting a chance, is getting a seat, and is going to drive F1 a few years and then retire like Nico Rosberg, and we might not ever see him racing again his entire life. Mm-hmm. Or an actual guy who, after his F1 career, goes to Le Mans, goes to NASCAR or Indy, or goes back to whatever, because he wants to race. He's still the Mark Webber, a big example, that still wants to race and wants to achieve something. And the actual Triple Crown, it might be utopia, it might be only Graham Hill that actually achieved it. Jacques Villeneuve was pretty damn close. It's still not just that aspect. It's the racers, the drivers, they want to race. And it's not just Formula One. We talk a lot about racing in Formula One, especially on this show, of course. But the more I'm actually rediscovering racing now, watching old races of different endurance or IndyCar, it's racing as a whole. Like, F1 lost that little racing edge that the other series kind of seems to still have.
Yeah, and that's so true. And I mean, there is such a rich and vibrant racing scene all over the world. When I was living in Europe, many years ago now, we used to go and watch all sorts of things. We go to Hockenheim to watch DTM. We went to Germany a couple of times as well to watch Rally Deutschland, and that was absolutely insane. I mean, I'm not sure what the safety regulations are now, but 15 years ago, you could still basically stand up right up the edge of the tarmac, and the cars could go by so fast you could lean out and touch them, and Formula One as well, of course. So it's really cool that this whole Fernando thing has rekindled my interest in the Indy 500, and I think partly because he's there and his orientation's been going well, and we've seen a side of Fernando that we haven't seen in Formula One for quite some time, and that's a guy that looks really engaged, and he looks like he's enjoying himself, and he looks really focused. I mean, not to say that or suggest that he isn't focused, engaged with McLaren, but I mean, obviously that isn't going the way that he liked. He left Ferrari with a bit, I think, of frustration that they weren't able to deliver what he'd hoped there. And McLaren's been a complete nightmare. But just like the press conference that we played on the show last week, just to hear that positive energy in Fernando's voice is something that we haven't heard in a very, very long time.
And it's a different type of focus. It's not just, okay, I remember lap number 23. I have to press a dial red, dial blue, dial green to make sure that the engine's okay. Okay. It's not that kind of enthusiasm. It's, okay, I hate the flat out here, and I need to make sure that I had the clutch, and what's my right foot doing? I'm not used to using it. And it's actually driving. It's physically driving the car and just trying to adjust all your perception of driving a car to an oval circuit, and all your different knowledge that you remember from the time you're actually growing up as a driver with cars that are not necessarily built to be drive correctly, that you have to bring a lot of input to it to get a good time. And I think it's rekindled. Maybe it's big words for me to say about him that I've never met the guy, never talked to the guy, but it seemed at least to have rekindled like the 10-year-old car driver inside of Alonso.
Yeah, definitely. But the one person that isn't so stoked or interested about Alonso's move to Indy, well, maybe not so much Alonso, but more, I think accurately, is his replacement for Monaco, and that's Mark Webber. And he was talking about Button's return to Monaco, because obviously Jensen's going to fill in for Fernando while he's away. He's called it a non-story, and basically what the gist of his comments were that unless Button can go out and win Monaco, then it's not really anything to be newsworthy at all. Even if he gets a couple of points, it's like, so what, big deal? He'll just sort of get like a bit of a footnote in the standings and the stats for 2017, which is true. And I guess only a guy like Mark Webber would put it so bluntly, but I wonder what Jensen has to say to that. And obviously, I mean, Monaco's different than every other race on the entire calendar. So, I mean, he doesn't have to be necessarily as quick as some of the other guys. I mean, he's going to need some luck, obviously. I mean, the big power disadvantage that Honda has isn't going to be quite so evident in Monaco, because, I mean, it's not like one of these power circuits like, say, Monza or maybe Silverstone, where if you've just got the horses, I mean, you're just going to disappear into the distance. I mean, obviously, being a tight and twisty and compact circuit, I mean, you're going to need a car that's well balanced and handles well, and we're not really too sure how good of a car the McLaren is, because we don't really see them drive around too much this year. So we'll see, but yeah, I think Webber does have a point. Unless Button wins, it probably is nothing more than just a bit of a footnote.
I wouldn't be surprised if as like the first sign of something going wrong with the car, which there's a very high probability that happens. Be like, all right, I'm done. I'm just going into bed, going back to my penthouse or my apartment close by and just hang.
Yeah, get out of the car, walk across the street, go home, and watch the rest of the race from your couch.
I'm hungry. I'm just gonna go home. All right, pitting the car next lap. Box.
Well, also Lewis was saying this week that he finds it quite sad to watch the way that McLaren has declined, and they actually haven't won a single race since Lewis left for Mercedes in 2012. And I actually hadn't realized that until I saw it written down in black and white that it had been that long. So, I mean, they're coming up on 5 years, which is amazing.
The Lewis curse? Is it too soon to call it a curse?
I don't think so.
Look at the car. It actually, there's a lot of drivers cursing in that car, so maybe it is a curse.
Well, yeah, it depends which way that you're talking about it, but it definitely does look like that there's something that they've like run afoul of. The racing gods somewhere are not happy with McLaren. But talking about some of the other cars on the grid, and after Lewis's poor performance in Russia, Toto Wolff has said that they believe that they just need a little bit of tuning to get the car to its full potential. And they're talking mostly in the areas of weight reduction and also in the suspension. Because that is one thing that I have heard, is that the Ferrari this year is quite a little bit, or not a little bit, but actually substantially lighter than this year's Mercedes. And that obviously makes a big difference in the way that the car handles and the balance and all those sorts of things. And the Ferrari especially is quite good in the warmer climates on the tires that we've seen so far. So whether or not Toto is right and they can get the tuning sorted out, because I mean, I don't remember a race watching Lewis sort of the way that he sort of faded. I mean, right from the start, I mean, he just dropped back into third, fourth position and stayed there all race. I mean, he was the best of the rest. I mean, usually that's Kimi Räikkönen, but not last time.
It's like he took the wrong car. It's like, come on, this car's not made for the way I drive. What's going on? Why am I not the fastest? What's happening? I'm usually number one. What's going on? It felt weird. Even him was kind of wondering what was going on. It didn't felt right all weekend long, last race. But it's a different, now we're back to Spain, and I wouldn't be surprised to actually see like Hamilton maybe dominating the entire weekend. it's that type of circuit, and the number of experience, and well, you never know, could be a crash. We've seen this happen last year, but is it clear that Verstappen won his first race last year? No, it wasn't Barcelona, not Catalonia. Well, that's the same one.
It is the same one. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, no, that you're 100% correct, because this is the race last year when Rosberg and Hamilton collided. What was it, in turn 3 or 4, whatever it was, and both of them ended up in the gravel trap. And then it was Max Verstappen in his first race for Red Bull went and.
First race for Red Bull. Nothing Kvyat can say about it. Like, fine, you replaced me, but at least the guy won. What can I say?
Well, not only that, I mean, he won his first race, and then that's about the point in the season last year when Danny Ricciardo started to hit that dip and things didn't really start to go his way. I mean, obviously he's shown up by his brand new teammate to get his first win in the brand new car for his new team, and very first try, which is amazing. And then he had that unfortunate pit stop debacle at Monaco a couple of weeks later. I mean, he ended up second, but by rights he should have won that. And then he went on to Canada and finished well down in the order in 6th or 7th. And he just really wasn't anywhere. And it took him, couple of months before he really started to get back on track again. But this week, it's going to be really interesting to see who's going to have the edge there. I mean, obviously all these drivers know the circuit there at Barcelona exceptionally well. They do so much testing there. I think that they could probably drive the circuit with their eyes closed and not miss a gear change or a corner or braking point or anything like that. But who's going to have the edge? I mean, I think we all expected, or maybe we didn't expect Ferrari to win in Russia, but I guess we just didn't expect Bottas to have that start that he did and build up the lead that he had to stay in front of Vettel and Raikkonen. But I think we can. Well, I was just going to say, maybe we can't say it's going to be Red Bull, but we were talking before we started the show that obviously Red Bull has a whole bunch of new upgrades and a bit of some upgrades on the engine as well. So it's hard to discount them. So I guess maybe in a roundabout sort of a way, I'm not really too sure what to expect this weekend, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, exactly. But I wouldn't be surprised to see McLaren figured out something since last race. Ferrari has been quick, especially in race configuration. We'll see if Vettel continues. Maybe another win for Ferrari could be interesting for the championship, because we all expect Mercedes to be really back up there really quickly, right? It's like history has shown us something, right? And recent history has shown us that usually Mercedes are in front. So for Mercedes to not be in front, we're not used to it. So I wouldn't be surprised if, they were in front last race. But what I mean is dominating. And I wouldn't be surprised if that gap really becomes almost barely like a tenth of a second by just maybe the next race, and then Monaco and Montreal, and it becomes interesting. You never know what can happen in Montreal, and that's the beauty of the Gilles Villeneuve track. But before we get there, it'll be interesting because we mentioned the Red Bull upgrades. There's Ferrari upgrades. There's going to be a lot of upgrades. It's that time of year now. It's back in Europe for at least this time around, and a lot of upgrades usually come to Barcelona.
That's true. And with the European portion of the calendar where the races are going to be for the next couple of months, this is a point of the year, like you say, we typically see a lot of upgrades get on the car. So who's going to be the cars that make all the gains, and who are the ones that don't quite improve as well as some of the other ones? But it will be, I want to see what's going to happen with Ferrari, obviously, because we've seen over the first several races how it was Mercedes and Vettel, and then the other weekend in Russia, it was Bottas against the two Ferraris, and Hamilton wasn't really too there. So it's been really interesting just in the Constructors' Championship. So that'll be something I'm going to be keeping an eye on. But one thing that they're going to introduce at Barcelona, which isn't necessarily a performance upgrade, is just the way that they're going to make the cars and the drivers' names and numbers more visible. From Mercedes released some pictures today, how they're going to put Hamilton's and Bottas's names and numbers and even their flags on the shark fin on their car. And I think that's about time. I mean, on TV, it's not so bad when you can see the cars and the drivers' helmets quite easily. And that's one complaint I had, especially of Red Bull over the last couple of years. They've got these little tiny numbers, especially just on one of the barge boards on the side of the car. And when I was at the Spanish Grand Prix a couple of years ago, when the cars are moving that fast in real life, it's often a little bit too difficult to try and really focus in on the driver's helmet. But those little numbers on the side were tough to see. And even on TV, it'll help. I mean, usually you can tell just by a bit of the color on the driver's helmet who it is, without even really having to focus on the number. But I think it's a good thing. I think it just makes it a little bit easier for everybody that's following along.
I agree. But if you want to do this, why not really do this? On the back spoiler, why not just write the name of the driver? Remember, like in the early 2000s when West and tobacco companies couldn't sponsor certain races, and you had like McLaren with Kimi and with Mika written, or David written on the side and in the back. I thought that was kind of quite awesome. Why not? Like, I know it's prime real estate for sponsors, but the spoilers, like with the DRS, you don't even see them half the time anyways, right? So how about like you write Alonso? Well, maybe not Alonso, it won't be there when we change the rules. But I don't know, Kimi, Vettel, or Seba. Like, I know you can't put like Raikkonen because it's too long to fit on the spoiler, but you know what I mean? Like, actually something that can actually differentiate easily and know exactly what it is. And then you know what happens? If we have the name of the drivers all like this, drivers become all a bit bigger stars, and bigger stars for drivers means F1's bigger. It's that simple. It's you have to hype up the stars. You have to hype up the personalities, their driving styles, the good versus the bad. The great storylines makes great TV, which that's what we're watching. It's TV. So why not put the name on the actual spoilers? Because then it actually makes a big difference. Yeah,
they could, or else another thing that perhaps they can consider. I mean, Formula One is more open to the whole social media thing nowadays. I mean, you see every time you go on to Twitter, for example, or Instagram, that they use hashtags like Seb5 or Kimmy7 or LH44 or Nico Rosberg, for example, was NR6. Why not do something like that? You know, do a little kind of cross promotion across from TV and kind of work your social media channels into it, and it'd be kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think that you know, of course, it's prime real estate for advertising, like you say, but got to do something a little bit better than that. I mean, when you look at the concept pictures that Mercedes put out, I mean, it's still a fairly tiny name and number that's just going to be on the shark fin. And next year, there aren't even going to be any shark fins. So what are they going to do then? I mean,
exactly. So that's why I think it could be a good idea.
Definitely. So, yeah. Well,
just a little bit of not news, but rumors. And it would make sense with the way Force India is going right now. If you're looking at the sponsorship, right? You remember Sahara, the company that holds 42.5% stake in Force India.
Yep.
It used to be those colors, or the gray, orange, and green. Now it's BWT and they're pink. But Sahara could sell their 42.5% stake in Force India in a bid to help release founder Subrata Roy from jail. So that could be interesting. A large stake, not controlling of the board of Force India, but a 42.5 stake. That's a pretty big when you're looking at an ownership of a team that could be on the market right now.
Well, that would be an interesting situation to watch, because we've seen just only this last year with Manor Racing and their attempt to get a new owner, and then that obviously didn't work out, and the team went into administration, and that sadly ended up with the team not making it to the grid despite having a new car all planned out. So
yeah, but Manor, as much as they were romanticized, they were terrible. So it's not a loss. But when you're looking at Force India, though, Mark, it's a team that has some success, some good infrastructure is already in place, and some good potential for the future with their drivers as well. So if you are a constructor that's vying to maybe come back in F1 in the next few years, because it's the rumor, right? We've seen constructors come back at Laramée, for example, Porsche and Toyota over the last few years. They were not expected to and make big comebacks. Who knows? If one of those constructors wants to come back in F1, the way they used to do it is you start by buying a bunch of stake in a team, and then you buy controlling stock, and eventually it becomes your team. And Force India maybe is a good option for that. This is pure speculation here, but if you are a BMW, I doubt it. But if you are a Toyota, BMW, or who knows, an American constructors, if you are an automobile constructor and you want to be in F1, this could be an opportunity.
Well, very much like the way that Renault got back into the sport. I mean, they were successful running their own team for quite some time, and then they decided to leave, and then they came back in to rescue the Lotus team, or Caterham, I guess. No, Caterham's gone, so sorry, I'm getting mixed up. There seemed to be so many teams that were called Lotus at one point in Formula One. It got a little bit convoluted.
Two at the same point, right? There were like a Lotus, which became a Haas? No, the Lotus. You see, we're all confused.
Well, Lotus became Renault, and then the other Lotus team became Caterham, and that obviously disbanded and is now no more. And then Haas was just basically their own entry, and they just sort of started from fresh, if I remember correctly. But it gets a little bit confusing. But sort of talking on a similar subject, Liberty Media chairman Case Cherry has said that he has basically a full page of potential new venues of different places vying for Grand Prix, which would be absolutely amazing to see, because we're down a race from last year. Last year was 21, which was the busiest F1 schedule ever. I mean, apart from that 3-week summer break, I mean, it literally felt like we were having a race every other weekend, or at least or every weekend at some point. And I know that over the winter, once Ross Brawn was brought in as the new sporting director for Formula One, he said he'd like to see up to 25 races a year. And obviously that's quite an ambitious schedule. And then he also threw out the idea for a non-championship race at some point to test out different theories and different ideas and different concepts that they want to introduce to Formula One racing. So you could look at that as well. So, I mean, 25 races, I mean, that seems like a lot if that's what they're aiming for, or if they're perhaps looking to fill the gap. I mean, obviously Malaysia's done after this year, and then there's also Singapore is rumored that it may not continue for too much longer in Formula One. So are we looking at replacing venues that are about to leave Formula One for one reason or another, or are there other ones that want to get in? He didn't really clarify too much other than dropping that nice juicy hint. And he didn't really give any names either. I mean, we talked about the possibility of having a race in Vegas or New York, and they've spoken about that before, how they would really like to have a second race in the United States, which makes obviously a lot of sense. So this is one that you're going to have to mark as keep your eyes open and ears open for developments over the next coming weeks and months.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised. I forget his name now, but the gentleman who's just below Chase Carey, you have Ross Brawn, and his peer who takes care of the marketing side. And
Sean Bratches.
Sean Bratches, yes. There was a good interview on Sky Sports with Sean Bratches, and the lead up to last week, 2 weeks ago's race. And he mentioned, though, that, it might get to 24, 25, but in a way that it will be continentally focused, where you kind of have like seasons where, not season per se, but you have like the Asia round, where you have like the 4 or 5 races in that continent, then the 4 or 5 races in Europe, then America, then South America, right? So you would do like 4 or 5 races in each continent, or maybe a little bit more to come to 24, 25 races. And in that way, you would save on cost. You have like just one big trips to get to the continent, then you travel locally, and that could be the idea for the future, to truly make it a world tour type of Formula One championship, to have those continental kind of trips and bases, and you can have like a home away from home for 2 months while you're in the South America, when you're in North America, when you're in Europe. So maybe that's the way to go in the future. And it makes more sense to cut down on travel costs as well, is to go with a few races in each continent, each region at a time.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I have to admit that I like this time of the year when you get the European portion of the calendar. I mean, it is, but it isn't really, because, I mean, you have Spain and then Monaco, and then they hop over to this side of the Atlantic for the Canadian Grand Prix at the beginning of June. But you get some great races. I mean, Monaco is a classic, and you've got Silverstone, you've got Spa, you've got Monza, and then you finish off the year going to some of the other tracks that I really enjoy in Formula One. You go to the Circuit of Americas down in Austin, Texas, the Mexican Grand Prix I've quite enjoyed over the last couple of years, Brazil, Japan. But it would, like you say, make more sense to kind of focus on a specific region at a certain time of year, because you look also in the Middle East, you have a race in Bahrain and Abu Dhabi, and relatively speaking, they're not too far apart. Geographically, in the calendar, in the Formula One calendar, they're almost 180 degrees opposite. Bahrain coming at the beginning of the year, and Abu Dhabi is always the season finale, or it has been for quite a number of years. But that would be about the only way they could really make it work, is, like you say, focus on an area, travel within that area, and have the races there, just to cut down on the travel expenses. And I think it would be pretty cool. And I would definitely like to see something in the future where you have like a continent hopping. I think it would be pretty cool to see a Grand Prix in New York City, for example, and then you have the Circuit of Americas, and then down to Austin or up to Montreal or Mexico, just however they work it out. I think it would be pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. To finish the show, Mark, how about we do a little round of predictions?
Sure. Let's go for it.
The Spanish Grand Prix that's coming this weekend. How about pole? Who's on pole? Let's start there. Who do you got? Who you got on pole?
I've got Lewis Hamilton on pole this weekend.
Yeah, I'm going with you too. You know what? Lewis Hamilton's ego has been bruised by his teammate. And usually what happens next is Lewis Hamilton does a lap of his lifetime and will get the pole.
Yeah, actually, I think we're thinking on similar lines here. I'm basically saying Lewis Hamilton all weekend long. I think Lewis is going to take pole position. I think he's going to win the Grand Prix. And I think this is going to be a statement race from Lewis after the disappointment in Russia. And like you say, his ego has been bruised. And Lewis, being Lewis, is not going to sit down and take that lightly. And I think he's going to come out with the gloves off, and he's going to really throw down the gauntlet. And I'm going to use as many metaphors as I can here. But yeah, I think it's going to be Lewis's weekend.
All right. I have Lewis Hamilton on pole 2 and for the race. Barring any incident, I think Hamilton has the victory on Sunday, but could be incidents. We've seen it happen before. And if it happens again, maybe out of nowhere, if there's an incident, and if it's not maybe at the top, and maybe a Red Bull squeeze in because a Ferrari would have been taken out by a Mercedes or something. And maybe that's a possibility, but my probable prediction, a 90% plus, if you have money to put on the race, Lewis Hamilton is your choice.
Yeah, definitely. Lewis is going to win. I'm going Seb on the second step of the podium, and my surprise third place finisher, I'm going with Max Verstappen. I think that Max is going to, I think he's going to get a podium this weekend. I think that Red Bull's overdue. I think that they deserve a little bit of something. I think that Max is going to have an extra little bit of horsepower in his pocket, or motivation at least, going back to the site of his very first Grand Prix win last year. So that's my podium: Hamilton, Vettel, and Max Verstappen. So let's see how it works out. Usually when I don't bet on things, I'm usually right, but the moment I put money on it, that I'm completely off.
So I have Hamilton first, and you know what we haven't seen, but especially heard so far this season, is angry Vettel. Angry Vettel on the radio because he has been taken out by somebody else. And I kind of have a feeling it's coming this Sunday. How about Danny Kvyat takes out Vettel for old time's sake? How about this happens on Sunday? And you have left on the podium Lewis Hamilton. And Bottas is included in that accident. So you have Hamilton, Verstappen, and a surprising Felipe Massa third. Felipe Massa feeling rejuvenated, actually openly mentioning that, you know what? I might even come back next year. Maybe it won't be for Williams, but maybe I'll be back in F1 next year. So Felipe Massa, my surprise third step on the podium.
There you go. After Felipe's emotional farewell at the Brazilian Grand Prix last year and all the sad feels and everything like that, I'm not ready for him to go again and do that all over again. So if he wants to stick around for a couple of years, I give that a double thumbs up. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know what? Just to really wrap up the show and come back where we started, we've talked about Indy 500 and how Alonso's trying. And Mark Webber, a driver that actually attempted to win Le Mans on multiple occasions with Porsche over the last 2 years, he has said, you know, Alonso's trying for the Indy 500 this year. It might take more than one occasion, but he's still got at least a good 10 years in front of him to win Le Mans. And that's the interesting part. When Alonso's going to gear and focus his attention to endurance racing in Le Mans, that will bring another crossover extravaganza, and I'm already excited for it.
Absolutely. Can't wait. Hey, Kevin, so before we go, just let everybody know what's going on the network this week.
Big shows about the Canadian Premier League all week long, and tomorrow we're going to, maybe this morning when you listen to this show, Thursday at 10 a.m., we're going to review the Toronto FC win on the road against Columbus that happened Wednesday night. Friday, we'll preview the games of the weekend. We have an Hard Radio coming in the next few days, not sure when yet, but we'll be talking about the NBA playoff. And as always, for all your soccer coverage and any other sports coverage that we cover for now, you can follow us on Twitter at SportsPodNet and myself at Kev Laramée.
Very cool. And of course, you can follow this show on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod. And that's it. That's a wrap. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Scuderia F1 podcast. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, then head over to ScuderiaF1pod.com. Want to get in touch with us? Then email us at ScuderiaF1pod@gmail.com.
You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.